Some people spend their whole lives searching for happiness, not realizing that the mind they're using to search is the very thing standing in the way. You could be surrounded by love, success, and peace, but if your mind is trained to focus on what's missing, none of it will ever feel like enough. That's not a flaw in your life, that's a pattern in your thinking. And here's the truth the Buddha revealed long ago. The world you live in isn't just out there, it's shaped, moment by moment, by what you choose to see. If your mind always reaches for the negative, the stressful, the lacking, that becomes your reality. But if you could train your mind, truly train it, to see the good, to hold gratitude, to notice the quiet beauty in ordinary moments, everything starts to change. In today's video, we're going to talk about how to do exactly that. Not with fake positivity, but through powerful, grounded Buddhist wisdom that's been practiced for thousands of years. These aren't just teachings, they're tools, and by the end, you'll start seeing the world through a lens that actually brings you peace, not pressure. So stay with me. Don't skip around. Every part of this message builds on what came before, and I truly believe it's something your heart needs to hear. And hey, if this kind of content helps you feel more centered or understood, there's one small free way you can support what we're building here. Just tap the subscribe button. It helps this wisdom reach more people, and it keeps this space alive for all of us who are walking this path gently together. Some thoughts come and go like passing clouds, but others quietly take root, and those are the ones that shape the way we experience life. We don't always notice it, but the stories we tell ourselves inside our minds carry a weight. The quiet judgments, the subtle fears, the lingering comparisons. Over time, those thoughts become the filter through which we see the world. It's not always the outside world that needs to change, it's the way our mind is interpreting it. And that's where real transformation begins, not by trying to force the external to fit our expectations, but by gently training our mind to notice, nourish, and nurture what is good. The Buddha spoke often about this. He taught that everything we are begins with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world, he said. That's not just a poetic line, it's a deep spiritual truth. If your inner world is filled with fear, resentment, and doubt, then no matter how beautiful your surroundings are, you won't be able to feel the peace within them. On the other hand, if you're nurturing patience, gratitude, and compassion within yourself, even the most difficult situations start to soften. It's not about pretending things are perfect. It's about learning to relate to life from a place of clarity and wisdom. Think of your mind like a garden. Every thought you entertain is a seed. Some seeds are nourishing, like those of kindness, joy, forgiveness. Others are weeds, like envy, anger, or self-pity. And just like in any garden, what you water grows. The more you feed certain patterns of thought, the stronger they become. So if every day you replay old regrets, or constantly tell yourself you're not good enough, those seeds will flourish and crowd out everything else. But the moment you start watering different seeds, ones rooted in appreciation, compassion, and trust in life, you begin to grow a new inner environment, one that supports your peace instead of stealing it. This is why Buddhist practice places so much emphasis on mindfulness and mental awareness. Meditation isn't just sitting still for the sake of quiet. It's training the mind to recognize what thoughts you're feeding. It helps you see clearly, this thought is based in fear, or this judgment is coming from old pain. And once you can see it clearly, you gain the power to choose differently. That's where freedom begins, not from controlling the world, but from understanding your mind. The Buddha also taught about something called right thought. It's one step in the Noble Eightfold Path, and it means aligning your thinking with intentions that are wholesome, skillful, and rooted in non-harming. It doesn't mean you never have a negative thought, that's impossible. But it does mean becoming conscious enough to not let those thoughts lead your life. You can see them, acknowledge them, and then gently redirect your focus. So the next time a thought comes up, whether it's judgment, fear, jealousy, or even a sense of lack, just pause. Ask yourself, is this a seed I want to grow? Is this the kind of energy I want to cultivate in my life? Because every time you engage with a thought, you're either reinforcing an old pattern or creating space for something new. This is not about blame, it's about awareness. And with awareness, you gain the power to create an inner world that feels calm, kind, and clear. There's a moment, often quiet and unnoticed, when your mood suddenly shifts. You're doing fine. And then someone's tone, a piece of news, or even your own thoughts send you into a spiral. What changed? Not the world outside. What changed was what you let into your mind. The Buddha taught that our minds are incredibly absorbent. They take in impressions like water soaking into soil. And over time, those impressions shape how we feel, how we think, and even how we act. That's why in Buddhist practice, one of the most important teachings is sense restraint, being deeply mindful about what we allow through the doors of our perception. Because not everything deserves a place in your inner world. Think about it like this. Your mind is a sacred space, a temple, and every sound you hear, every image you see, every conversation you have, it's like someone stepping through the doors of that temple. Some visitors come with peace, others come with noise, confusion, or even destruction. But here's the thing, we often leave the doors wide open. We let in gossip, comparison, fear-driven news, endless scrolling, and people whose energy leaves us feeling drained. Not because we want to suffer, but because we've never been taught how important it is to guard the gates. Buddhism doesn't ask us to live in isolation or fear. It invites us to become conscious of our choices, to stop feeding the mind junk and start offering it nourishment. Because the more chaos you let in, the more your inner peace gets buried. If all you hear are messages of scarcity, judgment, and urgency, you begin to believe that's the nature of reality. But it's not. That's just the result of what you've been letting in. So what would it look like to be more intentional? Maybe it means starting your day not with your phone, but with a few minutes of silence or reading a passage from the Dhammapada. Maybe it's spending more time in nature, letting the sound of wind and the rhythm of birdsong soften the noise inside. Maybe it's choosing not to join every conversation filled with complaints or fear. These might seem like small acts, but in Buddhist wisdom, small actions done mindfully are what shape the mind over time. They are seeds of clarity and strength. The Buddha reminded us that whatever a person frequently thinks and ponders upon, that will become the inclination of the mind. In other words, what you consume mentally becomes who you are. If you surround yourself with beauty, truth, compassion, and stillness, your mind begins to reflect those same qualities. But if your environment is filled with negativity, fear, and drama, your mind will mirror that too, even if your heart longs for peace. This isn't about being perfect, it's about being aware, being protective of your inner world the same way you'd protect your home from harm. When you guard the gates of your mind, you create space for deeper wisdom to enter, for the still, clear truth of the present moment to arise. And in that space, something beautiful begins to grow, a mind that is less reactive, more loving, and deeply, deeply at peace. That's not just philosophy, it's freedom. One you can begin cultivating today. You know, we live in a world that's constantly pulling our attention in every direction. Notifications, headlines, conversations, expectations, it never stops. And when your mind is always being pulled outward, it's incredibly easy to overlook what's already right in front of you. That's the strange part. We crave peace. We want to feel calm. We want to be happy. But we keep looking for it in the next moment, the next achievement, the next fix. And in doing that, we miss the small sacred moments that are already happening. This is where the Buddha's teaching on mindfulness becomes so powerful, not as a trendy buzzword, but as a life-changing practice. The Buddha taught that mindfulness is the direct path to liberation. Why? Because when we're mindful, we're not lost in the past or worried about the future. We're simply here with what is. It sounds simple, but in practice it's profound, because when you're present, you start noticing things you used to rush past. The sound of the wind moving through the trees, the way sunlight filters through your window in the morning, the warmth of your tea, the softness in someone's voice when they say your name. These aren't dramatic moments, but they're real. And when you're present enough to actually feel them, they begin to heal you. Most people think mindfulness is something you need to sit down and formally practice. And yes, meditation is a beautiful and essential part of the path. But mindfulness is also about how you live your life moment to moment. It's about bringing gentle awareness to your day. When you're brushing your teeth, can you feel the motion of your hand? When you're walking, can you hear the rhythm of your footsteps? When you're speaking with someone, can you truly listen without preparing your next reply in your head? These simple shifts bring you back to life, not the life you're planning or remembering, but the one you're in right now. What's especially beautiful in Buddhism is that mindfulness isn't just about being present, it's about being present with kindness. There's a tenderness to it. You're not observing your life like a strict judge. You're watching it like a friend. You begin to notice your habits, not to shame yourself, but to understand yourself. And when that awareness deepens, something shifts. You stop living on autopilot. You stop reacting to everything with the same old stress and fear. Instead, you begin to respond with clarity, with patience, with peace. One of the most powerful practices is what's known in Buddhism as sati, the Pali word for mindfulness. It means remembering to return, remembering to wake up. Every time your mind wanders into fear or distraction, you gently return to the present moment, not with force but with compassion. And with each return, you strengthen your ability to be here. It's like training a muscle. At first it feels impossible, but over time you build a kind of inner steadiness, a way of showing up for your own life without rushing through it. The Buddha said, "Do not dwell in the past, do not dream of the future, concentrate the mind on the present moment." It wasn't just poetic advice, it was the key to ending suffering. Because when we stop running from now, we stop running from ourselves, and in that stillness we begin to see clearly. We begin to feel whole again, not because everything outside us is perfect, but because our relationship to life has changed. We become available to joy. We begin to notice the good, not just when things are going well, but even in the quiet, messy, ordinary moments that used to pass us by. You know what's wild? You could be having a perfectly ordinary day, nothing major going wrong, but if one small thing doesn't go the way you expected, your entire mood shifts. Someone cuts you off in traffic. You misplace your keys. A message you were waiting for doesn't come. Suddenly it feels like the day is ruined. Your mind clings to that one negative moment and forgets everything else. And it's not your fault. It's just how the human mind is wired. The Buddha understood this tendency very deeply. He taught that the mind naturally leans toward craving, dissatisfaction, and comparison. It's always reaching, always wanting. Even when things are okay, it whispers, "But what about more?" That's where the practice of gratitude becomes such a powerful antidote. In Buddhism, gratitude isn't just being thankful when things go right. It's about seeing clearly, recognizing what already is, even when life feels messy or uncertain. The Buddha often reminded his followers that suffering doesn't come from not having. It comes from the mental habit of not seeing what we already have. So gratitude is really about attention. It's about turning your gaze gently away from what's missing and noticing, with presence, what's already here. Not in some forced or fake way, but with a quiet, honest awareness. When we make gratitude a daily ritual, it starts to rewire the way our mind operates. Instead of constantly chasing some imagined future happiness, we begin to find contentment in the present. That shift is subtle but powerful. It's like adjusting the lens of a camera. Suddenly everything looks a little clearer, a little softer, and you begin to realize that peace isn't in the next achievement, the next purchase, the next relationship. It's in this moment when the mind chooses to be fully present and appreciative. And here's the beautiful part. You don't need anything fancy to practice this. No special tools, no perfect setting. It can be as simple as pausing in the morning before the noise of the day takes over and asking yourself, what am I grateful for right now? It might be the sunlight coming through your window, the breath moving gently in and out of your body, the fact that even if yesterday was hard, today is a new chance. These small recognitions are not small at all. They are acts of awakening. They pull us out of autopilot and bring us back to life. The Buddha's teachings always pointed us towards simplicity and presence. He taught that the causes of suffering aren't out there in the world. They're in how we perceive and relate to the world. Gratitude shifts that relationship. It softens our grasping. It replaces the ache of not enough with the fullness of, this is already something. And when we do this regularly, even briefly, we start to notice more and more blessings we used to overlook. A kind smile, a moment of silence, a warm drink. These become little portals into stillness, into joy. And perhaps the most transformative part is when you practice gratitude, even when things feel heavy. Not to deny the pain, but to make room for the light. To remember that even in hard times there's still something good, a lesson, a connection, a moment of breath. That doesn't erase the difficulty, but it gives you a steadier place to stand while you move through it. Some people spend their whole lives chasing that perfect moment when everything will finally fall into place. When there's more money, less stress, deeper love, more peace. They postpone their happiness like it's something waiting on the other side of success or stability. But in reality, that moment almost never arrives in the way we imagine. There's always something else, another responsibility, another distraction, another worry. The Buddha taught that the craving for things to be different is one of the deepest roots of suffering. We suffer not because of what's happening, but because we believe it shouldn't be happening. And in trying to escape this moment, we often miss the quiet goodness already within it. This is where the practice of contentment becomes powerful. Contentment doesn't mean you don't grow, improve, or aim higher. It means you don't put your peace on hold while waiting for life to be something else. It means you recognize that even in the middle of uncertainty, even with the flaws and disappointments, there's still beauty. There's still breath. There's still life unfolding. The Buddha never promised a life without pain, but he did show us how to meet life with a peaceful heart, even when it doesn't look the way we want it to. So ask yourself this: what story is your mind telling you right now? Is it saying, I can't relax until I fix this? Or, I'll feel better when that person understands me? These are mental habits rooted in craving and aversion, two of the main causes of suffering in Buddhist teachings. They pull us out of the present and place our well-being in some distant version of the future. But life isn't lived in the future. It's unfolding now. And the mind, when left untrained, will always find a reason to delay joy. But here's the shift. When we train the mind to pause and open to what is here, right now, we begin to experience a kind of soft peace. It may not be perfect. It may still come with grief or fatigue or imperfection. But there's something sacred about saying, this is enough for now. The smell of the air after rain, the sound of someone's laughter, the way the sunlight falls through the window. These aren't distractions from life. These are life. And when we are constantly rushing past them in pursuit of something better, we're missing the goodness that already exists. In Buddhist tradition, this is why mindfulness is so central. Mindfulness brings us back. It invites us to actually see what's here, to taste our food, to feel our breath, to appreciate the moment. And from this presence, we learn that peace doesn't require perfect circumstances. It only asks for a receptive heart. Even amid difficulty, you can notice a kind gesture. Even in loneliness, you can feel the richness of stillness. The Buddha often reminded his followers not to wait for the world to give them peace, but to create it from within through presence, wisdom, and compassion. Letting go of the fantasy of a perfect life opens the door to a more honest one, and in that honesty, something beautiful happens. You stop resisting your life and start living it. You stop waiting for happiness to arrive and begin recognizing it in the small, quiet moments that were always there. This is not resignation. It's liberation. It's the freedom that comes when you realize you don't have to fix everything to feel at home within yourself. Some days you don't realize how much the world around you is shaping the world within you. You wake up feeling fine, but after scrolling through news that triggers worry, spending time with someone who constantly complains, or watching things that leave your heart feeling heavy, you start to carry that weight without even knowing why. What we surround ourselves with doesn't just pass through our awareness. It plants roots in our mind, and those roots quietly grow into moods, beliefs, and patterns. The Buddha spoke about this in many ways, reminding us that our outer environment plays a big role in our inner freedom. He taught that wise association and mindful consumption are not just helpful, they're essential. Think of your mind like a sponge. It soaks up everything, every word, every image, every emotional tone. Even if you tell yourself, "It doesn't affect me," it does. Slowly, silently, the inputs you allow in begin to influence how you think, how you feel, and even how you see yourself. That's why in Buddhism, the practice of wise attention and guarding the sense doors is taken so seriously. It's about being conscious of what you're letting into your sacred space, your mind, because not all information is wisdom, and not all connection is nourishing. One of the most overlooked parts of mental training is this: being intentional with your environment, the people you speak with, the content you consume, the spaces you spend time in. They either uplift you or deplete you. So take a quiet inventory. Do your surroundings reflect the kind of person you're trying to become? Or are they keeping you stuck in cycles you're trying to leave behind? There's no need to judge or cut everyone off. This isn't about becoming rigid or isolated. It's about becoming selective with love. Loving yourself enough to choose peace over noise, choosing inspiration over drama, choosing inner stillness over outer chaos. Even small changes in your environment can create big shifts in your state of mind. Start your morning with a few lines from the Dhammapada instead of social media. Keep a peaceful space in your home where you can sit quietly, even for 5 minutes. Play music or chants that calm your nervous system. Spend time in nature, which the Buddha himself often sought out for solitude and reflection. These aren't grand or dramatic acts, but they are powerful. They're subtle signals to your mind that it deserves peace and that you are protecting it. And then there's the people. Relationships are some of the strongest environmental influences we have. If someone constantly brings out your irritation, anxiety, or self-doubt, that's not a small thing. That energy stays with you long after the conversation ends. Buddhism encourages spiritual friendship, or kalyanamittata, the idea that the people we surround ourselves with should help guide us toward wisdom, not pull us away from it. Friends who remind you of your practice, who helps you return to your values, who speak gently and live mindfully. These are the people who make the path easier to walk. The more you consciously surround yourself with beauty, silence, wisdom, and compassion, the more your mind begins to reflect those same qualities. You'll notice less reactivity, more clarity, a deeper sense of being rooted in your values. It won't always be perfect. You'll still have stressful days, challenging people, and moments where the noise creeps in. But the difference is, you'll recognize it. You'll be able to pause and gently return to what nourishes you. There's a quiet moment that happens when you realize you don't have to keep thinking the same way you always have. You don't have to keep repeating those same tired thoughts about how you're not enough, how things never work out, or how the past will always define you. And maybe no one ever told you this before, but you can actually choose which thoughts you want to water and which ones you're ready to let go. That's a form of freedom most people don't even know they have. But in Buddhism, this is core to the path. The Buddha taught that our thoughts are not harmless. They're not background noise. They're the architects of our lives. Every action begins in the mind. Every word, every decision, every habit, it all starts with a single thought. So when you start to become aware of the way you think, when you actually notice what you're telling yourself all day long, you begin to understand why your life feels the way it does. If your inner voice is constantly critical, harsh, or afraid, then even the best parts of your life will feel heavy. But if you slowly begin to shift those thoughts, gently, patiently, with mindfulness, you begin to build a mind that supports you instead of sabotaging you. The Buddha called this right thought, part of the Noble Eightfold Path. It means thinking in ways that are kind, honest, and aligned with wisdom. Not because it's polite, but because your thoughts shape your karma, your actions, your energy, your direction. Now, this doesn't mean you'll never have a negative thought again. The goal isn't perfection, it's awareness. You start to notice when your mind is spiraling into comparison, or self-doubt, or judgment, and instead of feeding it, you pause, you breathe, you ask, is this thought helping me grow, or is it keeping me small? That's a powerful question, because a lot of the time, we don't even realize we're choosing thoughts that hurt us. We just assume that if a thought shows up, it must be true. But Buddhist practice teaches us something different. Not all thoughts are worthy of our attention. Some are just echoes of old wounds. Others are habits we picked up from the world around us, but you don't have to keep repeating them. Start small. When you notice your mind being hard on you, try replacing the thought, not with fake positivity, but with something honest and compassionate. Instead of, I always mess things up, try, I'm still learning and that's okay. Instead of, no one really cares, try, I'm opening myself to a deeper connection. These little shifts might feel awkward at first, but over time they change your inner landscape. Your mind becomes a place where growth is possible, where mistakes are met with grace, where you begin to feel safe because you're no longer at war with yourself. Another beautiful teaching from Buddhism is that you are not your thoughts. Thoughts arise, stay for a while, and pass. They are like clouds drifting through the sky. But your awareness, the part of you that notices those thoughts, that's something deeper. That's the true you. And from that space, you can choose. You can choose to think in ways that align with your values. You can choose to speak to yourself with compassion. You can choose to hold thoughts that reflect the person you are becoming, not the version of you that was shaped by fear or shame. This is how we plant seeds of peace, one thought at a time, one inner conversation at a time. It doesn't have to be dramatic. In fact, the most powerful changes often feel subtle, but the ripple effect is real. Over time, those kinder, wiser thoughts begin to shape your actions. Your relationships soften, your presence deepens, and your life, slowly but surely, begins to reflect the beauty blooming inside you. The Buddha didn't teach that we must become someone new. He taught that we must remember who we truly are beneath the noise. And that begins in the mind. One thought, one breath, one moment of awareness at a time. There's something we often forget when it comes to inner peace. It doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It's not something we stumble into after all our problems are solved or when life finally gets easier. It's something we build moment by moment, breath by breath. The same way a strong body is built through consistent movement, a peaceful mind is built through intentional practice. And that's something the Buddha understood deeply. He never promised a life without challenges. What he offered was the path to meet those challenges with a stable, compassionate, and aware mind. That's the real power of training the mind, not to escape life, but to meet it fully and wisely. Think about how much energy we put into fixing what's outside of us. We try to control people, perfect our routines, chase success, avoid discomfort. But even when we win, we still feel restless. That's because the real struggle is happening internally. The mind, if left untrained, will always find something to worry about, to fear, to complain about. It will wander into regret about the past or fear about the future. It will compare, judge, crave, and resist. But the Buddha taught that we don't have to obey every thought that arises. The mind is not the enemy, but it is wild. And like any wild thing, it can be trained, not with force, but with patience, with steadiness, and with understanding. That's why consistency matters so much. One moment of mindfulness might bring relief, but it's the repeated moments over days, weeks, years that transform how we live. It's not about doing something huge once, it's about showing up again and again, even when it feels small. That's where the strength grows. Every time you pause to breathe instead of reacting in anger, you're training your mind. Every time you choose to focus on what's good rather than what's lacking, you're planting seeds. Every time you catch your inner critic and replace it with kindness, you're shifting your internal world. And little by little, that shift becomes your new foundation. The Buddha used the metaphor of watering seeds. Inside each of us there are seeds of fear and seeds of love, seeds of anger and seeds of peace. Whichever ones we water the most will grow stronger. The mind is the field. What we give our energy to becomes the landscape of our experience. So training the mind isn't just about discipline, it's an act of care. It's how we stop feeding the patterns that hurt us and begin nurturing the ones that heal us. And yes, there will be days when your practice feels pointless, days when your thoughts seem louder than your breath. That's okay. The goal isn't perfection, it's presence. Even on the messy days, even when the old habits creep in, you're still doing the work. The Buddha never said the path would be easy, but he did say it would be worth it. Each step, no matter how small, brings you closer to a mind that doesn't react blindly, but responds with wisdom. A mind that doesn't panic in uncertainty, but leans into trust. A mind that doesn't chase the illusion of control, but rests in awareness. You don't have to get it perfect, you just have to keep returning. One breath, one thought, one moment at a time. And as you keep showing up for yourself in this way, your mind begins to reflect that consistency. It softens, it opens, it heals. And in that space, peace naturally begins to grow. Not as something you chase, but as something you've patiently, lovingly cultivated within. The most beautiful change doesn't come from fixing everything around you. It comes from gently shifting the way you see. When your mind begins to notice the good, even in the midst of chaos, you no longer wait for peace, you become it. Thank you for walking this path with us, for showing up for your inner growth, and for being a part of Buddhist journey. If today's message spoke to your heart, take a moment now to watch one of the videos on your screen. It may be exactly what your soul needs next. Until then, keep breathing gently, living mindfully, and trusting that you are becoming the peace you've been searching for.